Welcome to T21Mom.
Hi friends, it's your friend Mary and welcome back to the T21Mom podcast. And this is episode 155. I know it's been a hot minute since our last episode at Christmas, and honestly, where has the time gone? Christmas was awesome. We hosted 26 people, and quite literally, it took me 3 days to recover. It was pretty massive. I love having people over at the holidays, but it really was a huge undertaking. But we all had an awesome time. And over the holidays, my friend Mary, we call her Mary too, came down and we had a really nice visit. We used to live in the same apartment building, and she's actually the reason Dennis and I met. She is the one who actually swiped right for him. And her oldest son and Ainsley are close in age, and we used to do a lot together when we lived in the same building. She has since moved to the interior several hours away with her family. She has 3 boys now, but Ainsley has always been her princess. And I really miss those fun times, the park, dinners and barbecues and just hanging out together. And it was just so good to see her. And on the last day of school before the Christmas break, there was like a little breakfast that the Access program, that's the program that Ainsley's in, that they put on every year and parents can join in. And Ainsley's EA said, "I have something to tell you." And without missing a beat, I said, "You're leaving." And he told me that he had decided to go back to school to become a teacher. So I can't really fault him for that. But I was thinking, oh, great, more change. But the EA who was with Ainsley in the mid-afternoon, I don't really know how they change up the EAs, but I didn't really ever see her, but she became her primary EA. So the transition was relatively smooth. It wasn't too bad. And she always calls Ainsley her beautiful girl. And now that's what Ainsley calls herself. It's quite cute, actually. And I know a lot of last year, I talked, I think, a fair bit about some of the challenging behaviors Ainsley was having. And last year was a very, very challenging year. I actually think it was the hardest year I have ever had with Ainsley. In the spring, I was pretty close to just losing my mind as her behaviors were so bad. There was a lot of banging of objects, mostly her iPad, cell phones, and the TV remote. I think last year we went through 4 iPads. So thank God for Apple Care, because I would just walk in and I would get a new iPad every time. But there were literally dents in all of our furniture, even our hardwood floor and the walls. And there's also this constant kind of wailing, sort of grunting. I don't even know how to really explain it. And it was just really, really hard. And it was a really trying, hard time. And, you know, I put a call into her pediatrician and we ran some blood tests. So we initially were going to put her on one type of medication, but her kidney enzymes were a bit high. They've resolved now. I don't really know what the problem was. But we put her on another medication. It's actually a medication that's used for ADHD. I don't know if Ainsley actually has ADHD, but her EA noticed immediately, like within a couple of days, on the very lowest dose, that she saw improvement, which was great. And also her art therapist that she would see during the summer, she was probably on her full dosage by then, commented that she was doing much better. She could sit and focus. And so there's been a nice side effect to that medication because it really helped curb a lot of those behaviors, the impulsivity. It's significantly reduced the banging, and the wailing and the grunting was significantly reduced. Thank goodness, because it was, like I said, it was a really hard time, and we had to go up the medication gradually. It was only 1 milligram a week, and the doctor said we probably wouldn't see any difference until about 4 milligrams. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, another 4 weeks. And she was right. It was right around the 4 or 5 milligrams that we noticed an improvement. And, you know, the behaviors, they did significantly improve, but they started creeping in again around Christmas or just before Christmas. And we saw our pet about a week before the break. And I actually thought she was going to increase the dosage, but she didn't. And I was actually kind of disappointed because I really didn't want a repeat of last year. But, you know, it was a little rough in the beginning of January, but I don't know. It just, things really turned around. I tried doing really deep body massage when she was having a meltdown, and Ainsley wouldn't have meltdowns often, but I was seeing her crying more frequently, and just where you could tell that she was dysregulated. But I would do these really deep massages, like literally like her whole body from her head to her feet, and it worked. And I also started being much more intentional in telling her that I loved her and giving her lots of kisses and telling her how proud I was of her. You know, for example, she kept her shoes on in the car because she's always taken her shoes off, but she started leaving them on, which was great. And so I really praised her when she did that. And, you know, of course, I've always told her these things, but I really tried to make a point of doing it a lot. Like if she brought her dishes to the sink, I thanked her and kissed her and told her that I loved her. But it just all sort of started coming together because she has been such a dream. And, you know, 2025 had been such a challenging year. But now I actually enjoy being around her. I actually want to be around her, whereas before it was really, really hard. And of course, I have a lot of that mom guilt about that because it was just hard on all of us, I think, you know, including Ainsley, but Dennis as well. And he honestly has the patience of a saint. He's way more patient than I am. But I think kind of what happened is, you know, it was a combination of things, you know, not just me telling her that I'm proud of her and giving her lots of kisses and that I love her, but I think a lot of it was maturity, and her hormones were finally sort of settling down a bit. And obviously the medication was a big game changer. And you know, I got her a spin chair for her birthday, and another dual diagnosis mom recommended it, and she absolutely loves it. And I just love hearing her laugh and giggle when she's on it. You know, it just makes me happy. And she always has to have a few spins before we go to bed. And sometimes it's a bit hard getting her off the chair. And we also learned that we can't have the chair out in the mornings because she won't get on the bus. So I have to hide it at night so that she's not delayed getting on the bus. But, you know, I just love seeing her on it and how much joy it brings. So for any of you mamas out there, especially the dual diagnosis mamas, the spin chair is honestly, it's almost like a game changer. And it wasn't terribly expensive. It's just a little spin chair that literally sits on the floor. And I think it was $80. So it wasn't terribly expensive. And I think it's one of the best presents I've ever gotten her. So I'm really just optimistic for this year after such a really challenging year last year. And in the fall, we started a medication that I've been hearing a lot about in the autism community and also in the dual diagnosis community. We started taking Leucovorin. I hope I said it correctly. And there's been some studies that show that those with autism have benefited from an improvement in speech when they started taking it. And I spoke with our pediatrician about it, and I even brought an article about it because I wasn't really sure how she would react to it and if she would be open to it, because it's not a drug that's used for that. It's actually used for patients who are taking chemo, and it helps with some of the nausea and side effects of the chemo. But this has turned out to be an added benefit to it, to this particular medication. And she agreed to put her on it. And I was so thankful that she was open to it, as I have heard others saying that they were having a hard time with their pediatricians to get their child on it. And our pediatrician told me that they were talking about it in her doctor chat group, and also that one of the doctors in her practice had put her son on it. So she knew that she could trust it if this other doctor that she actually knew was using it. And I thanked her for being open to trying new things. And, Ainsley's been seeing our pediatrician since birth, and I've always really liked her and feel like she is such a fabulous pediatrician. And I just feel so lucky that we have her. And, the medication has not had a huge dramatic change that I was hoping for, that I've heard in some others that they've had. But I have definitely seen an improvement in her speech since she's been on it. So I'm really grateful for that, because, I just have always felt that speech is her gateway in life. Like, if you're able to communicate, sometimes it's not going to be through speech. It could be through a device or spelling or what have you. But just being able to communicate your wants and needs, is going to make things easier for you in life. And so I'm really grateful that we're seeing these improvements in her speech. And, currently as I'm recording this, we're on spring break, and it's 2 weeks, and I have the first week off. And, I tried to fit in some appointments that we can't do on Mondays, which is my typical day off. And one of them was going to the dentist, and she totally rocked it. It was a new hygienist who hasn't seen Ainsley before. And before she got started, I told her to be careful, but careful for her sake and her fingers, because I was worried that Ainsley might try to chomp down on her fingers. She's usually not too bad, but we've had a couple close calls previously, but she did so well. She let her scale her teeth. She let her polish them. And I personally can't stand getting my teeth polished, but Ainsley, she just totally allowed it to happen, and also allowed her to paint on the fluoride. And I was just so proud of her. And because she did so well, I promised her a McDonald's smoothie for doing so awesome. And, I think that was also a little bit of a motivator for her, because I kept promising her that during the session. So, it was just great to see. But I think it's also, maturity. Things just start happening when our kids are a little bit older. And we also went to the aquarium because we have a membership. And I used to work there many moons ago, and I do love going there. It's a bit of a drive, but it's just so awesome. I knew it was going to be super busy because it's spring break, but we had a really nice time, and I just let Ainsley kind of lead the way. And we saw lots of the jellies and fish from the tropics and all sorts of fish and sea life off the West Coast. Because the last time we went, a couple months ago, it didn't go great. Ainsley kept flopping down and she wouldn't get up, but not this time. She totally rocked it. She walked all over the place, and we went outside and we had our lunch, and we just had a really nice afternoon. And then we also went for high tea with my rockin' mom friend Sandra and her daughter Kiara, who also rocks an extra chromosome. And it was a really lovely afternoon. They had a kids selection, and they each had lemonade instead of tea. And we had our own selection, and the food was fantastic. And it was just so nice to catch up and chat and, share some of our stories and our challenges with school and the dual diagnosis. And, we joked that if our kids just had Down syndrome, it would be a walk in the park. We're joking, of course. We know, regardless of a dual diagnosis or not, this journey at times can definitely be challenging. And her daughter, Kiara, I think she's a year older than Ainsley, and she is actually selectively mute. She was talking up till about 2 years ago, and it's been really hard for Sandra and for her family. She talks about how she has to accept that Kiara may choose to never talk again. And I know how much that must be hard for Sandra, and it hurts my mama's heart. She did tell me that Kiara will come home and go straight to her room and talk and sing to herself, but she won't do it outside of her room, which is kind of really heartbreaking. But I do hope that one day they can find some answers, and that maybe Kiara will choose to talk with her friends and family again. But it was a really lovely afternoon despite the weather. The food was delicious along with the tea, and it was just a nice time to catch up and see how each other is doing. It was just a really nice afternoon. And we are going to a dance party to celebrate World Down Syndrome Day. It always falls during spring break, so I actually never do anything for Ainsley's classes. I don't really expect Ainsley to dance at the party tomorrow. She's not really into that. She might kind of groove to the music. She's kind of been doing that more at home lately, but it's also just a nice time to see other families, and we'll wear our Down syndrome shirts and we'll wear our crazy socks and just have fun. And it has been so nice to be off and to catch up on things, but also to spend some time with my girls. We don't do that enough. And today we made cookies together, and it's been kind of a low key kind of week. And I so have been loving seeing all the lead up to World Down Syndrome Day in my feed, but I admit I used to be a lot more active for these types of things, but it has kind of waned over the last few years, and I never really understood this when Ainsley was younger, why people stopped doing things. But now I get it. I'm tired. I'm older. I'm juggling so many things that it kind of takes a back seat. I mean, I'll certainly go to various Down syndrome events that are put on, but I find I post a lot less now, and I'm not as engaged as I used to be in various groups, but I've learned that that is okay. Advocacy, however you look at it, is exhausting because it never ends. And I've realized, you know what? Do what you can, but know it's okay to also do nothing. You do you. Whatever you choose to do, happy World Down Syndrome Day. So thanks for listening to the T21Mom podcast. And to be honest, I'm not really sure what this year will hold for the podcast, but I do have some guests lined up for some future episodes. But if there is something you want to hear or learn about on the podcast, let me know. You can drop me a line at T21Mom.com. I know this journey isn't always easy, but know that I love you, I see you, and I hear you. Keep on loving on your rockin' kiddos, and I'll see you next time.